Hello ladies and gentlemen, Hanzo here, and today we're taking a look at Runes. And Runes is a top-down roguelike dungeon shooter that's just appeared on Steam about a week ago or so. And now I'm not a person who's played a lot of roguelike games, so you're probably going to see me do really badly at this. So if you're screaming at the screen watching me play, yeah, I'm just warning you right now, you're probably going to do that if you're big on these sorts of games. Now, before we begin, we're going to take a look at the options menu first, because there's quite a bit to say about this. There's a lot of options, but the thing is, this is probably the most basic of menus that I've ever seen in any games. It's clear that, you know, interface design is not their big, strong point. But, you know, it doesn't look great, but it has the options there. Like, there's a lot of different gameplay options, like, for example, turning off screen flash or screen shake, which is nice. You can actually turn these things off, because they might interfere with gameplay and stuff, and map opacity and all that. There's a lot of different options available. But one thing that I don't like is the way the menu controls. Now, if I want to change the music volume, now, highlighting it, clicking on it doesn't seem to do anything, but if I use the A and D keys, I can increase or decrease the volume. Now, it took a while to actually figure that out, and that's not something that you normally see in most games. It's not normal. You don't normally see this in any other game, so to have that as the setup for the menu is a bit worrying. Maybe it was set up for a controller, I'm not really too sure, because I don't see any gamepad options here, although I don't have a controller set up at the moment, so that could be why. But the rest of the controls for the actual game are pretty standard. You've got the W, A, S, and D keys for movement. You've got your various 1 to 4 hotkeys for the different slots. But how this game actually controls... Here we go, there's actual controller options down here. And I have no idea what any of these do, because I've not actually used a controller for this before, so... Never mind that. Video options, there's not much here, mainly because this is actually a 2D game, and when you see the actual game, you'll kind of understand why. Now, there's a few other things down here, like the bestiary is basically just all of the enemies that you might encounter. Now, I've played this a bit, so there are some of these already available to check out, and they have just a little bit of information and things, not really too much to worry about. The rune dex is what's more interesting, because this game, it focuses on the creation of spells. Now, where a lot of other games will focus on things like finding items in a dungeon. For example, if you play Binding of Isaac, you might find collecting different items as you go to kind of power up different things that you do, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not a big Binding of Isaac player. I've only played a little bit of it, so... pardon me if I actually do get a couple of things wrong, but the basics of Runes is very different in the sense that you find these runes as you travel through dungeons and you combine them to make different spells. So all of these are spells that I have not discovered yet, but these are the basic runes, and you get to choose one of these when you start. So you can actually see the little animation there showing you what it does, and it shows you in actual numbers what these things do, which is very useful. And I've always said more games should really do that. We do need more games to just tell you in just the plain numbers what everything does, so we can actually compare the spells. Now, all the basic spells, there doesn't appear to be any particular spell that's better outright. They all seem to have a sort of balancing factor. For example, Earth Spike seems to do, I think, the highest immediate damage. I'm not seeing anything that does higher than that. Yeah, it does 8 damage, but it only attacks one target at a time, and it's immediate at the target, so it doesn't have the sort of beam, which can be a good or bad thing depending on how you play, and there's no knockback from that. So there's a balancing factor everywhere. Then there's all these different runes. These are the actual runes that you'll find in the game, and then you combine them using combiners that you pick up. So that's kind of how you play it. I will show you the adventure mode. We're going to play on Wimpy because, to be honest, this is not an easy game. At least I've found it really difficult even at this level. So you only unlock the other difficulty levels as you complete to a certain level at each preceding difficulty level. So that's kind of how the game will go along. Alright, so now here we get to create our character. Now, the actual character itself is on the right, and on the left is a passive ability. So, for example, we can choose any of these. Now, take note that whatever you choose, you're still going to be a mage of some sort. You still cast spells, so that doesn't change necessarily. For example, if I was to choose a paladin, it doesn't mean that I'm a melee character. I still cast spells. So you kind of have to just pay attention to the special ability that you get on the right. So, for example, the paladin has a active ability that can reflect damage. This swamp mummy has the ability to block damage, and so on and so forth. So you can choose the different character as you want, really. What you prefer. I think I'm going to choose... I haven't played the swamp mummy before, so let's try that. So this has the ability to block all damage for the next 4 seconds. So that seems to be something that might be useful. And our passive, we can probably choose one of these. So there's a lot of different ones. For example, Blessing of the Ifrit does give you the ability to touch enemies and light them on fire. So that could be useful. Let's see. Blessing of the Dwarf. This looks interesting. It increases your damage up to 40% when you are close to an enemy. But when you're further away, you take a damage hit of 70%. So you have to be close to them. I think what we'll do is we'll take the Blessing of the Ifrit. So if anything touches us, then we deal damage back to it. Now there is also a locked character over here. Which can only be unlocked as you progress throughout the game. So you don't actually get this one at the beginning. Which is, I suppose it's something to work towards, but it's not a really... I wouldn't say it's a real big deal or anything, unless it's a character that you're more interested in getting. After all, the discovery of spells seems to be more of the focus of the game. Alright, and this will be our starting spell down here, so you can see the Kindle, which is the flaming one, all the way up to the Chaos Bolt, which uses the dark... I believe it's called Entropy. Or Entropy is the dark rune. And, no, I think we're going to go with Spark, because I tried this one out before and it was quite nice. So we're going to go with that. And yes, let's create our character. Now, the loading screens do have a little bit of a story or exposition going on down here. I've not really paid much attention to it, and as far as I've gone through it, I still can't figure out what it's about. It seems to be kind of a Braid-esque retelling of a story through, I suppose, the main character. I'm not sure exactly if it's the character you're playing or if it's a character in the game. I still haven't figured that part out yet. But, you know, it's there. It's nice that it's there, but it's not really a big deal. Right, so every floor that you go on will have a special thing that's happening. So in this case, enemies have 10% more health. There's also more damage, more speed, etc. And this is our sparking ability. You see, we aim with the mouse, and we move with the W, A, S, and D. So the spark ability, no matter which direction or where I actually aim it, it will always hit at the maximum range. So we can destroy all these boxes and stumps to try and collect things. We've got collected a heart down here. I don't think that's going to be of any use to us, though. No, we can't even pick it up. Yeah, so the hearts will heal you. And yeah, so this is a roguelike. So every level, of course, is randomly generated. So all the different rooms and stuff, these are all sort of randomly generated as you go along. Now there is a map, which I will bring up in a sec. If we hit tab, we can actually see our current inventory. What runes we are carrying. These here are the combiners. So you have double combiners and triple combiners. These are used to combine the runes together to make different spells. And this is, of course, the map that shows where we're going. Of course, it helps to have a map, so we're going to keep that up. And it looks like these are the only 2 ways to go. No, there's 3 ways to go. Right. Oh. And already... not in a good spot. So we're going to use our special ability here to try and block some of that damage. These are all giant rats and stuff. See, yeah, at this point you're probably screaming at the screen going, no, you're doing it wrong, you're supposed to do this and that, but to be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing anyway, so that's kind of to be expected. And of course, there are these giant rats are actually being buffed by that mage-like character on the other side over there, which I'm not sure I've seen before. I don't think I've seen that one before. He doesn't seem to attack, he just seems to buff them. So I suppose killing him at the beginning might have been the better idea. Maybe? Possibly? No idea. Right. That's a good thing that this heart is still here. Okay, so that's that room cleared. Let's see if there's any things we can pick up. Well, the way I tend to play this is a little bit more cautious than I suppose most other people would, but that's kind of the way I like to play it. Now, each level also has a bonus room, which gives you a special challenge. There'll be a portal, and let's see if we can actually find it later on, and I'll show you what it is. But basically, you defend a portal against imps that come in waves, and they don't stop, so at the early stages it's almost impossible to really beat it, at least from what I've found. And only when you get in a sufficient amount of spells do you have a chance of beating it. Now I should point out these skeletons only have a melee attack, but the problem with them is, when you kill them, they turn into a pile of bones, and if you don't crush the bones, they come back up at full health, which is not ideal. We do want to get rid of them. Also, you know, trying not to get hit too often. So let's knock out these water elementals. Right. Okay, so there's two ways we can go. Actually, there's three ways we can go. This way, I believe, is the bonus room, so I can actually show you this. No, it's not. That was not a smart idea. As is typical with a lot of roguelikes as well, you do get trapped into the room. So you can see the actual gate is closed, I can't go back. And there is a double combiner over there that we might want to try and pick up. Also, these guys are borrowing little buggers that are kind of difficult to hit, so I'm trying to keep away from them as much as possible. But one thing I will say about this game is that it does have a lot of enemy variety, which is definitely very useful if you're going to go through the dungeons and try and progress throughout the game. One thing that I have noticed is that the actual dungeons themselves seem to use a very similar tile set, so things might look very samey after a while. Even if the dungeons are randomly generated, it might look very similar. Although, that being said, there are a large variety of room types, so there are many different shapes of rooms, and the rooms all contain various different things, such as enemies or items and that, which does kind of break it up a little bit, but the thing is, you know, the tile set being the same makes it kind of all look very similar. Alright, what we've actually encountered here is a form of debuff. Now, I know where my actual crosshair is, but the thing is, we've actually been given a debuff called Confusion, I believe. And in fact, we've been hit twice with it. And that means we have 3 crosshairs. Yes, this is not a glitch or a bug or anything, this is actually supposed to happen, and it's being caused by that brain-looking thing, which I believe is supposed to actually be a brain. Which is there trying to cause us some strife. So we are going to try and knock them out. Now you'll notice once I knock this one out, we have 2 crosshairs left. So it is an actual debuff that we need to get rid of. It doesn't make... Well, once you get used to the game, it isn't so much of a debuff anymore, because it only affects what you see, which isn't too big of a problem. But what I will say is, the first time you encounter it, definitely it is something that will mess with you. But yes, there's a very good variety of spells, very good variety of items, and definitely very good enemy variety, which is very helpful when the tile sets and dungeons kind of start looking the same. You know, having new enemies to fight all the time is definitely very useful. Alright, I'll show you one more room over here. Alright, so this is an escort. We have to protect an NPC as he goes along. Now you notice the enemies here aren't actually attacking me, but once I pick this up, it will begin, so hopefully we can actually do something. We have to protect this guy. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. He seems to be getting hit very easily. No, I think we're going to fail it. Yeah. So we failed. But at least it did take the heat off us for a while. Let him absorb the damage. And this is basically the whole game, really. I mean, I say the whole game, but what I really mean is that it is, you know, a dungeon shooter. It is a roguelike, so of course, when you die, it's kind of permadeath, you start from the beginning. But the thing is, as far as dungeon shooters go, this is kind of what you can expect. But what I will show you next is the actual sort of spell crafting system, if you will. Once I get rid of these rats, of course. Let's try to get rid of all of them. Right, so if we hit the escape key, this is our inventory. We have a double combiner here, and if I was to put an earth rune and an air rune, it is an undiscovered spell. So if I was to try doing this, if we combine it together, we now have Sandstorm. And we can put that in our spell slot. So now we have Spark and we have Sandstorm. So this is a spell that's been added to our spell book, and it'll remain in there for this entire playthrough. And it will also show up in the rune deck, so if I want to figure out how to make this spell again, I can do so. The only problem I find with this is that this is where the challenge comes in, because you don't know exactly what you're creating. You just kind of go in there blind. Once you know it, of course, and this is where several playthroughs are required, is once you know it, you can just put them together and go, oh, I know what this will do, or so on. Let's see if there's one I actually have created before. No, there isn't. Well, yes. So if there are spells that you have created before, you can actually put them in here and it will show you the results immediately, so you can decide if that's something you want to use for this playthrough or not. As far as the actual runes go, the variety is there. There's definitely a lot of possibility for creation. Creating lots of different spells, and the runes themselves also have small buffs to them. For example, this entropy rune is actually got the Rune of Wonder buff to it, which gives it an additional 5% bullet speed. So combining this with something else not just gives you the entropy part of the spell, but it also gives you bullet speed buff as well for that spell. So finding higher quality runes gives you the chance of crafting higher quality spells. So definitely a lot of variety in the actual game itself. The only thing I will say is that crafting the spells and that, there are cooldowns in this, so this is something that you kind of have to wait for a chance to do. For example, where I have an empty room here, then I can actually do that. And of course, the more powerful the spell, you can expect the more cooldown it will have, and it does actually show you that. If I hover over here, you can see the actual C and D, which disappears if I move that. You can actually see the cooldown is 2.5 seconds, whereas for Spark it is 0.2 seconds, however it only does 2 damage, whereas this, the actual Sandstorm, isn't so much as a immediate damage, it's more of a damage over time. As you can see, the tick damage is 7.5 damage a second, but it lasts 5 seconds, so it actually has a very high damage potential. So we're actually, you know, kind of in the sort of min-maxing territory when we talk about creating different spells and how to create the optimum build for a particular dungeon run. And indeed, this is kind of what the game is all about, really. It's just trying to discover all the spells so you can create the optimum build. And that's really it. It's I suppose it's a game that definitely has a lot of replayability, and in fact it thrives on that sort of replayability, which it would do. After all, a lot of roguelikes do tend to. And I say that's not really a bad thing necessarily. If the gameplay does track to you anyway, it will kind of keep you playing. After all, that's why you can see games like Binding of Isaac do seem to have a lot of repetition, especially with channels that seem to make loads and loads of videos of them. You can see, yes, the repetitive nature and, in fact, the replayability of the game does show. So, is it any good? As far as roguelikes go, this is definitely something that is attempting to be a little bit different. If I do have any complaints about it, it's mainly to do with the control response, because I'm not able to be very precise with the controls. I think you might have noticed earlier I had a bit of difficulty going through doors, and the main reason is because it's difficult to get that amount of preciseness to allow for that. If the controls responded just a little bit better, it would be a lot easier to control and definitely would save on just that slight little bit of frustration. After all, given how much feedback is required in this game, I would say that you definitely don't want a case where people can say, oh, I died unfairly because I was not able to do such and such, or I was stuck behind a box and not able to move, which does happen. I will say that definitely does happen. It's a valid complaint. So you definitely want to cut out the frustration aspect of it. Now, of course, it could be argued that, you know, roguelikes are games that do have a certain degree of frustration to that, and I would say that's definitely true. But it shouldn't be something that dominates the game entirely. It's not supposed to be a rage game, definitely. If you wanted somebody to play the game for a long period of time, it definitely shouldn't be a rage game. And I don't think Runas is that. Now you can see we've just leveled up here, so we have the chance of choosing one particular trait. This is very much similar to games such as... I'm trying to think of the name of the game now. Yes, but it's a trait that you've seen in many other games before, definitely. So these are all randomized. You do get a choice of 4 every time you level up, and they all seem to do different things. It's hard to tell exactly what they do because some of these I have not even seen before. I will say though that definitely you do want to max out certain things about the character, given things such as elemental mastery, maybe, or Soul Rip could actually be quite useful to replenish our health. After all, we are very low on health right now. Second Wind. This is a tricky one because this will supposedly save you from death, but you lose all traits. But given that this is the first time we've gotten a trait, it might not be a bad thing to do. And of course this, yeah, this is probably not a good idea because I have no idea how much HP I have, and I can't check. So, yes, well, I think I'll just choose that then. And we've picked up another rune, we've picked up some health here. And we're all set to progress to the next level. But yeah, I think that I'm going to leave that here. So, is it good? It really just comes down to, do you like roguelikes? And I know that doesn't really mean much. But the thing is, if you're a fan of roguelikes and you're looking for something that's a little bit different, this will definitely be one to look at. But as far as introducing somebody to the, I suppose, the roguelike genre, I'd say it probably wouldn't do that. As somebody who doesn't play many roguelikes, I don't think that this game would have gotten me into it anyway. I like it. I definitely like the premise of it, but I know that it's very different to what the rest of the genre is, so maybe it doesn't represent the genre that well, but it has a lot of the traits of other roguelikes, and maybe you might find this enjoyable. But as far as is it a good game or not, the art style is very nice, the gameplay itself is quite fun for what it is. The only problem is just the controls. It just needs to be a little bit more responsive. If I release the control, it should stop the character a little bit faster than that. It seems to be very floaty. It seems to have this sliding action where it gradually comes to a stop. And maybe it was added to be sort of realistic, but it just kind of gets a bit irritating, especially when you're trying to be very precise about it. And maybe a more advanced player won't have this problem, but as somebody who's new to it, it definitely seems to be just that little bit that might add an unnecessary frustration especially for a new player. But definitely it's a game that has a lot of variety, a lot of replayability, and every run will almost certainly be different, not just because of the randomized dungeons and floors, but also because of the spells that you can eventually craft, and just the sheer number of classes and combinations of passives available. You can definitely keep trying all of them just to get every single combination and find one that you like, and definitely at least one of them will suit your playstyle if this is a game that you choose to pick up. But anyway, that is it from me. This is Runas, now available on Steam for $9.99 or your regional equivalent. This is Panzer, and I'll see you guys next time. Ultimate.